Hi, I'm Chloe Canning. Welcome back for Season 2 on Lead with Courage. Illuminate Leadership acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land, which we would call this podcast the Yagara and Terrible People. We pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging.
Welcome to Lead with Courage, the podcast that celebrates the bold and inspiring stories of leaders making a difference. We're your hosts, Andy and Cherie Canning, and together we'll dive into the minds of the trailblazers, the risk takers, and those who embrace life with a growth mindset.
One of my favourite things about doing the Lead with Courage podcast is getting to talk to humans about their journey through life. And today we have an incredibly special story to share with you. We have the founders of TradeMutt, the founders of TX, and they are Dan Allen and Ed Ross. Now, this episode may be a little sensitive to young ears as we talked about lots of things, including suicide, as well as the odd little bit of profanity in there as well. So we hope that you enjoy this episode as much as we did. You know, quite often we have the opportunity to have our cups filled, Cherie and I, while we talk to our guests, and this was absolutely one of those occasions. So hope it rocks your world. Love to hear what you think. Welcome, Dan. Welcome, Ed.
So welcome, Ed and Dan, to the Lead with Courage podcast. It is fantastic to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
Here. Thank you. We just landed in on a flight the other day coming in from LA to Brisbane, and the guy across the aisle from me was wearing one of the brightest, best TradeMutt shirts I've ever seen, and it made me smile so hard just seeing, like, from America. I don't know how many people on the brand be exposed to in the States now because of that one, but it was so nice seeing someone wear that on the plane. And I was saying to Andy, can you believe we've got the guys on next week on the podcast? And it was just great timing. So I really want to thank you both for taking the time to come and share your story and tell us about TradeMutt. Dan, I mentioned to you, I got to view you on your TEDx talk. I think it was the end of 2022. So really been inspired by the work you guys are doing and been following along really keenly ever since. So we're pumped to get into this conversation.
Awesome.
Likewise.
That was a bit of a flex there, Shez, just flying back from LA the other day.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about your stomach problems while we're away, hey?
Were you up the front or down the back with the TradeMutt shirts?
Where was he sitting?
Yeah.
He was very tightly squeezed into an economy seat, that guy. I don't know that he would have had the most comfortable journey, but he looked good.
Spent all his money on the shirt.
Yeah. For a good cause.
TradeMutters are in the cattle class.
Yeah, we'll move it across the whole flight. Who knows, right? Andy, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, yes, you will, and I'll hand it back to the guys as well, and I'll just ask one question: what does Lead with Courage mean to you?
Lead with courage. Probably just getting it done, I suppose, isn't it? I think. Yeah, there's like an interesting thing I saw the other day about Elon Musk was talking about how, like, entrepreneurship or like being business leaders or owners or whatever, basically your job is to do the shittest jobs. And I suppose we've found that out through our journey is that, the thing that no one else can or wants to do is basically what gets lumped with the founders and owners and directors of organisations. And I suppose in regards to like the leadership component, you've just got to buck up and get it done. So I suppose it's just sort of, showing up and continuing to get it done is probably, leading with courage, I suppose, from my perspective.
That's interesting because when I was like looking at that question, I pretty much thought exactly the same thing as what Ed just said, because I was looking at the word lead and like leadership and all the talk and conversation around leadership generally in business and life. And I was like, what, like leadership is tough. Like, leadership is hard, especially when you've got a team, because, you do have to keep turning up and you got to keep turning up in the highs and the lows. And one thing that I have discovered is that there are high highs and there are low lows. And as the business grows and changes, like you experience both of it all the way through in different ways. And sometimes it's hard to like be that leader that you think you're supposed to be when you're struggling to just even turn up, But you still do turn up because you know that you've got, stakeholders and customers and staff and, you know, business partner and all this stuff, you know, and so you just turn up, and sometimes turning up is the best you can do, and even that is the best, you know.
Yeah, sometimes just being there is enough. Yeah, great. Awesome. Thank you. For those who might not be as familiar with the brands and the social enterprise that you guys run, can you tell us about TradeMutt, how it started, and then TX as well? Maybe take us back. I think hearing the early stages, you guys working together. Ed, you're an apprentice chippy from what I know. So can you guys take us back to the early stage of meeting each other and where this idea came from?
Well, we met on a building site in Brisbane in 2014 on a job in Chapel Hill. Oh, no, Kenmore. It was. Yeah, Kenmore. And yeah, it was weird. It was actually really weird because I mean, like, I don't think it's necessarily worthwhile going into this part of the story, but me and Ed have both got really like weird sort of, you know, stories from both of our sides of how we actually ended up on that building site that day, like working for that builder. And so, yeah, both really strange occurrences to have got to the point where we met. And so, yeah, that like I remember meeting Ed, and he was like fresh from wrangling cattle out in central West Queensland, like proper like hillbilly or, you know, whatever. Like I've never heard.
It's like nodding along in agreement here.
I've never heard anything like it. Yeah, and so I'm from Sydney, so like I don't know what a cowboy does or like how they are or whatever you call them. You don't call them cowboys. That's cartoons. You call them, I don't know, ringers or something. And so me and Ed, we met that day, and I was just very taken aback by this guy's character because he was nothing like I'd ever seen before. Because with the two new blokes, we got lumped together, unfortunately. So that was really where it kicked off. Ed, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, well, I suppose it was meeting on a job site and just building a mateship and whatnot from doing shit jobs together really.
First job was a waterproofing. Like the first job that we did was how many lineal meters of retaining wall do you reckon it was?
Oh, it was fucking a lot.
Like 150, maybe 150 lineal meters of retaining wall.
Wow.
And then
waterproof, like it was a waterproofing job, and it's like waterproofing a wall is shit. It's
like you know how if you drop something like behind the couch or like the TV cabinet, there's like a really small gap, and it's a fucking pain in the ass to get your hand down there.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what we had to do for 150 meters, but paint and make sure that like it was sealed properly. So yeah, it's a shithouse job, middle of summer.
Sounds like a blast.
Well, the thing is that we is that like I was 3 years out of my time as a tradie. Like I was a carpenter for like 11 years, I guess, on the tools. And Ed was like starting his mature age apprenticeship. So he was just starting out, and because we got lumped together and we're doing this shitty job. Like I shouldn't have been doing that job. Tradies don't do that job. Like that's an apprentice job or a labor job. You know what I mean? Because we're the two new blokes. We just got lumped with this shit thing, and Ed just would not stop whinging. Like he was just whinging, like in this real nasally cowboy westy voice, like "Meh." And I was just.
Has that changed? Has that changed over the years?
Not really, to be honest. But he and I was just like, eventually, I was like, mate, like you got to shut the fuck up. Like we got. This is a test. We're the new blokes. They're testing us. This is just a test of our character. You're not passing at the moment. Like all this whinging. Like what they want to hear is nothing. They want to hear the sound of your paintbrush painting this fucking wall. It is a test. Like let's just get on with it and get it done. And I think we carried that mentality all the way through, even today, about every single challenge that we've faced in business being a test.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And it's like, well, you're not passing right now with that attitude. So like, what else can you do?
Yeah.
I think it's a good lesson in life. And then fast forward sometime, I believe, recapping the TEDx talk, Dan, and I know this is not a fun part of the conversation, but I think a pivotal part of the conversation that you got a call from a mate, a really close mate, and he had some great news about getting a mature age apprenticeship. Do you want to talk us? I remember you saying you're standing at the top of a ladder. If that's correct.
I was on top of a ladder, exactly. You definitely watched that TED Talk, didn't you?
You probably know that story better than half our marketing team.
Well, let me tell you what happened, Dan.
No, yeah, I do. Yeah, I remember that. We both remember that day really clearly. To be honest, yeah, standing on top of the ladder, I think we were cutting cement sheets, and we we're putting a ceiling up or something, and Ed was cutting cement sheets, and so he was down on the floor taking his sweet ass time, probably not wearing a dust mask or any hearing protection, just doing it like a real cowboy. And so I had time to answer the phone when it called. And yeah, it was my mate Dan, who was one of the first mates that I made when I moved to Brisbane in 2010. Very quickly became like a brother. It was Dan, and he was just pure relation through the phone on that call, because he'd been looking for a mature age apprenticeship for ages. And just couldn't land anything, had a bit of instability in his life, so it was a bit of a battle, I guess, at times. But got that call that day, and it was pure relation. Couldn't believe it, bursting through the phone. Finally things are happening, and I remember that, how stoked I was for him as well, because it was just like, fuck yeah, here we go. And so obviously that was one of the hardest parts, I guess, to take about the call that I got, the 3 days later, which was to let me know that Dan had taken his life on Saturday night, which, I mean, I don't know that, suicides, or when you lose someone to suicide, it's impossible thing to know how to handle, because the mix of emotions, the range of emotions, are unlike any kind of other grief that I've ever experienced before. Because there's so many questions, and you go through the roller coaster of emotions, like the shock, obviously initially, and then the sadness kicks in, but then you sort of become overcome with this, or at least I became overcome with this feeling of being pissed off and angry, and just and so they're all really, really hectic emotions to have experienced. And I'll never forget that time in my life for sure. But that event, that was one of many events, I guess, that set in motion this whole journey that we're on now. The time following that happening was quite reflective, and it was just experiencing that process of grief, and how it just takes time to go through that. And as time goes on, the way you talk about things changes a bit, and the way you reflect on things changes. And obviously in that time, me and Ed, and I were working so much together at the time. So we were spending 16 hours a day with each other.
Yeah,
and so he really was my number one sort of support network, the most consistent, most reliable support network through that whole time. And he had no idea what to say or what to do, really, but definitely just held space for me to be able to vent or talk openly about kind of things and what had happened. And we used to talk about the mental health space, and we kind of started to formulate these observations of ourselves, which were things like the bus stop that you drive past, with the crisis support line, and the dimly lit room with the bloke with his head down and the blinds pulled, trying to personify depression, and and kind of thinking, well, that kind of advertising of mental health is not what, I don't think that's what it looks like, and I don't think that's what people's experiences really are. And that's kind of what me and Ed thought. We were like, well, no wonder no one wants to talk about this stuff, if that's how it's being sold to us, because no one would want to identify with that.
Yeah, the heaviness, the darkness, the negativity of it.
I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine. You couldn't imagine if you're in that spot that you'd really want to identify with someone that looks like that, I guess. Yeah. So, and that was when we kind of, I guess, had this sort of light bulb moment. We used to talk about workwear on site in the early days, one of many things, of ideas that we used to talk about. And we used to talk about, why has no one ever changed high-vis workwear? And that was just an idea. But then, I guess that seed of an idea then developed into this idea that, well, maybe we could do something to brighten up mental health and make it a bit more fun and colourful and a bit more, approachable and appealing, I guess. And that's when this idea for TradeMutt started to formulate, which was Maybe we could use workwear as a fun sort of way to start conversations about mental health. We didn't really know about social enterprise at the time. We didn't know of that style of business. We weren't really aware, but like we did some startup sort of programs and we were trying to start this business and we learned about that style of business. And yeah, it all kind of just came together a bit. It started to evolve into this idea, that we'd create some workwear to start conversations about mental health and make it invisible, make the invisible impossible to ignore. So I don't really know what we were thinking. To be honest, I don't think we were. I actually don't think we were thinking necessarily. And probably why.
Just
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
default mode almost, was it? Not a strategic approach to something. It was just going by the gut feeling.
I just really don't know what we were thinking. We just wanted to start something, and like we were doing cashies at the time, and we were renovating kitchens and bathrooms on Saturday nights and Sunday nights and all hours, and it was actually really stupid. Like the way we were working was almost so stupid that it was exhilarating. Like we were working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day together, over and over and over, months at a time. Take a weekend off, do it again. And yeah, but like we saved $30,000 and had this idea that, following this tragedy and through all the money that we had in the world at that, 30 grand on 1,500 work shirts and 2 computers. And yeah, we didn't have any sales strategy. We didn't know how we were going to sell them, how we were going to launch it, how we were going to do a website, how anything. We had no idea. So I think our naivety really was sort of good because as a couple of tradies, I think we had like a problem-solving mentality. And we were used to renovating twisted old Queenslanders and, houses in the suburbs, and you got to come in and think pretty differently to be able to do that stuff. And I think we took that approach into business, and yeah, we've been solving problems ever since, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so inspiring. A huge acknowledgement though, and I'm so sorry for your loss. And I wonder sometimes if knowing what has come out of that tragedy can sometimes give you a sense of a smile. But yeah, it's a dreadful experience, but a wonderful outcome in a strange way. If I haven't just really stuffed up my words there.
No. Like you're right. You're exactly right. Because like it is that, and it's like it's not. It's quite a layered thing, and that's a huge part of it. The fact that there is a positive thing that's come out of this, but like sometimes it gets you when you don't really expect it. And like yesterday was a perfect example of that because I had an email come through on Monday night from my mate's dad because we'd put out a post, an EDM to our community about the meaning of YNWA on our shirts, and that YNWA, You'll Never Walk Alone, is very much linked to my mate Dan, and his dad had got that email and responded to it late on Monday night, and I saw the email on Tuesday morning, but I didn't open it because I know I was like I can't, and so yeah, and I opened it yesterday afternoon at like 4:00, and yeah, it fucking rocked me because it was just like him talking about how happy he is and how important YNWA is in their life and was in their lives still, and he was like telling me all these stories about when he'd been to the football to see Liverpool play with his son, and it's getting me a bit choked up now thinking about it. But like, yeah, yesterday was just one of those days where you get an email from the father and it hits you right bang, and like because you don't really think about I don't think about it every day when we're doing what we do. Like I talk about it and tell the story, but when you're in the business of mental health, like you've got other shit to do all the time, but sometimes you forget that there's this whole thing that happened in the genesis of the story. And yeah, yesterday I was a bawling mess in my office. Like, and I had to go. I just get my computer and leave. So yeah, it gets you sometimes. But yeah, that's the game we're in, and I'm sure we'll talk about vulnerability at some point too, right?
Thank you for sharing that. You kind of got me when you were talking about that too. I felt a little bit of moisture kind of up and around there, and I got contacts on today, so that wasn't really helpful at all. So thank you for that.
Chopping onions in the other room too, eh?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's definitely a private chef downstairs. Incredible. And I'd imagine, in a way, I totally totally understand, to an extent where you're coming from, that it just takes a minute maybe to collect yourself, and then before you can kind of launch in and read that and acknowledge it, and then like let it sink in and let it marinate and let it almost go full circle and be like, yeah, fuck, that's why we do what we do. That's why we turn up every day. That's why we wear the high vis. That's why we have the beautiful, colourful shirts. That's why we worked cashiers and saved 30 grand and then bought 15,000 shirts and worked out how we sell them to honour people just like Dan and his family who know they'll never walk alone.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, I think sometimes myself and Ed, like in the journey of the business, and that like we've been at it now for 8 years. The business just turned 6. TradeMutt just turned 6 in March, but I guess we've been at it for probably 8 years on this project with the work we did before that. And I think we were out for dinner last night with a couple of our staff who had anniversaries, and me and Ed were just reminiscing on stories from like back in the day that we don't really talk about much anymore. And it's like, fuck, we've come such a long way, and we've actually done so much ridiculous shit together. And the stuff that we've done to get, to keep the business alive and to get it to where it is. And just like, I don't think I could do it again. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I could do any of it again, but like, we don't reflect. I think sometimes you get so caught up in the day-to-day running and, charging forward that you sometimes don't stop to reflect, on a lot of the where you've come from and how you've done it. And yeah, I don't know, I was kind of sitting there last night when me and Ed were talking, thinking, yeah, fuck yeah, like, yeah, we've been through it and we've done it, we're still doing it, but we've definitely been through it too, Reflecting's good.
Yeah, it's so true. I was literally having a conversation with one of our clients yesterday, and she's been in a business. She was employee number 2, and the business is 11 years old. And we're saying now they're at 150 people and the growth they're having, and there's all this growth. And we both had very similar conversations saying how we need to stop often and reflect and celebrate, because there's always more you want to do and grow, and not always just a revenue growth, but the impact, whatever it may be. And I think it's fair to say in the mental health space, God, we've got a long way to go. So there's never that point where you go, okay, we're done now. Like all the hard work's done. There's still so much to do. So I imagine naturally you don't stop to sit, reflect as often, because it's always like, well, how else can we impact the community? What else can we be doing?
Yeah, I think Ed and I are really, actually, to be honest, really bad for it. Like we just don't reflect like we should, So yeah, you're right. And everyone says it as well. You're supposed to stop and reflect. You're supposed to take stock, but like it's easier said than done, because when you just want to get on with business and you just, when you shit done, it's like, so, but yeah, it's
maybe
part of the whole roller coaster.
Yeah, isn't it? And I think sometimes it's these conversations, like when someone gets you to come on and share your story and share the moments in the brand and what you're doing, it kind of forces that reminder. Ed, over to you. Were there any reflections that that, as Dan just mentioned here, worth sharing today that from what you guys were chatting about yesterday? If there's anything.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, far out. Like, I mean. Yeah, it was mainly just around like the people that have been involved over the years, and it's kind of funny because like originally when we must have been in business for about 18 months before we hired anyone, and then like Dan and I were just having this almighty blue one afternoon, and one of us is like, well, who the fuck is going to want to work for us? You know what I mean? Like, there's no one is going to want to work for us. Look at what we look like. Look how we're acting. Anyway, and then eventually, like now, like we've got a team of whatever it is, 35 people across TX and TradeMutt. Like it's insane. But it's all the people that have come through along the journey as well. Like Iris last night, she's outside of Dan and I. She's our longest standing employee, which is 4.5 years or whatever she's been with us. And all the people that were before her and, all the people that have been after her and up to now, it's just like reminiscing on, oh yeah, that person, and that's right. Like they were doing that for us, and like we had no idea what we were doing, and God knows how we were having them do anything. And like, it was just chaos, for so long. And then, how they ended up leaving and like the hilarious situations in which we found ourselves. Cause like A, you don't get a manual on how to hire people, and
Yeah.
B, you don't get a manual on how to sack people. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah. And the bit in the middle of how to get people back on track. Yeah.
And then like we were talking about, like one of the first people we ever hired, and then eventually that person had to, we had to part ways. And then we were laughing last night about how like when we parted ways with that person, like they would catch the bus to work. So like I had to drive them back to their house.
Thanks. Your future is no longer here, but I'll give you a lift home.
But just like thinking back, just like, man, like the stuff we have done over the years that is just like, and like Dan said, like, if it's kind of the same thing. Like if someone said to us at the beginning, it was like, well, if you guys want to do this, like this is what it looks like. Like I doubt that either one of us would have been like, fuck it, sign us up for that.
You still be doing cashies on a weekend.
Yeah, I know. But like looking back retrospectively as well, like you wouldn't change anything, because where we're at now is through everything that's happened. So it's like, the business and the impact and everything, like it's never been better. And, the collaborations, like, Healthy Heads, Trucks and Sheds yesterday, like we're launching with them with TX and stuff next week. And like they're rolling out shirts like nationally with all their partners. And, it's just like unbelievable where we're at now compared to the beginning, which was, we've got no idea what we're doing, except we know we want to do something. And, there's lots of doors that are shut on you because they're people, and I understand why, because, people reach out to us now wanting to do things, and you're like, how can we, we can't really help you, you know what I mean? Like you've sort of got to get your own momentum. And that's been the whole thing really, is just like maintaining momentum, and momentum has not been in the right direction at times as well. But at least we've been like moving. And I suppose that also ties into the element of not being, reflective on the past, because you're like, well, we can sit here and talk about the old days, but it's like, fuck, we've got X, Y, and Z to get done today, so we can get X, Y, Z sorted for next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We don't live in the past. We've got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's sort of like a catch-22 to a degree. So it's it's a funny one. But I think, like Dan was saying last night, was hilarious, just sitting and reminiscing on just pivotal moments in the business where you just look back and shake your head, and just like, times where, like we were talking about as well last night, about how we had about $5,000 in the bank and we were absolutely buggered, and we were out of cash. And then
our first year of business, we've been in like 6 months.
and we reached out to some people for some help. And then as we're walking into this meeting to like work out like a marketing strategy to help get rid of these last shirts, they're like, oh, today's going to be $5,000.
Oh no.
Fucking just sitting there, just like a ball of anxiety, just like, we are so fucked.
What got you through that? Like, what did they just have a good marketing plan, or like what?
It was our idea. Like we came up with the idea in that meeting anyway. I don't know why we paid those people in the end, because they kept chasing us for this invoice. But no, I think that what has kept us going is like
what kept us going was the Portaloos in that.
Yeah, well, the Portaloos in that situation. Yeah, but both of our willingness not to throw the towel in, basically, is what has kept us. Has kept us going, because
out of that meeting, we came up with an idea to lock ourselves in 2 Portaloos for 24 hours, and which in the middle of Queen Street Mall in Brisbane, we had a TV on the outside and 2 GoPros on the inside of both of them, and so people were walking past, they could see 2 tradies for 24 hours in real time on the toilet.
And people donated money, or was it just awareness?
No,
the Today Show came and covered it on both days, on both mornings. Going in, Carl Stefanovic and Georgie Gardner, it was at the time, they came and covered it, and we got like 7 minutes prime time in the morning going into the toilets, like another 6 or 7 minutes prime time coming out the next day, and I think we made about $75,000 overnight selling shirts. We were back in business.
Yes.
Yeah, we were back on.
Oh my God, Carl Stefanovic, Portaloos, Queen Street Mall, and back in business. That is a story.
More iconic duo, there isn't one. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to say, if it was Koshi, would it have the same ring? Maybe it would. Maybe
no.
It wouldn't.
You're right.
He's a bit of a knob, isn't he? Fucking, I'm a Stefanovic. I'm in a Stefanovic camp.
Yeah, I think Andy and I had first started dating when Carl won his first gold Logie or whatever it was. I've never seen someone celebrate outside of sport so much than Andy celebrating that win.
Yeah, I think I can relate to Carl. I can't relate to Koshi, and I can't relate to Shervo the lunchbox either.
The lunchbox. Yeah, no, few men can. I'd say few men can.
I've got a few thoughts on that, but I'll leave that for another time. If we go back to now when we're talking about impact, because some people may be aware and maybe not, but can you tell us a little bit about TAX? And so basically TradeMutt is the workwear. People are buying that. 50% of proceeds, I believe, go to This Is a Conversation Starter or TAX. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah. So TAX started basically again through the journey of realizing that we just didn't want to like tick a box. Because, also in hindsight, and actually, and funnily enough, like we never even considered it for some reason. I don't know why, but like we never considered giving money to any existing charity because none of them sort of aligned with what we wanted to do. And we wanted to have control of our outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
And the mindset's always been like, we can give money to crisis support or whatever. It'll be a drop in the ocean. The government's giving them shitloads of money. They're already overrun. We're not fixing anything by doing that. Like we're just looking to do something, you know what I mean? And without being involved like in this space and knowing sort of the intricacies of like the difficulties for people to get help and like how these mental health issues are sort of arising, the general populace would be like, oh yeah, good work. Like they're donating money to Lifeline. Like let's support them. Whereas like we wouldn't be able to sit there and be like, yeah, we're really making a difference. We'd just be like, fuck, we're just ticking a box and taking people's money. So we were like, we've got to make sure that whatever we're doing is actually going to make some real change and that our money, which is not going to be a great deal because we're only a small little business, needs to be really making some change. So we, looked at the landscape and realized that like lots of people were obviously starting conversations in our work shirts, but then they were coming back to us and be like, well, where do we go like after that? Because I've got a mate at work who's really struggling or I'm really struggling. I don't know who to talk to, like it's more than these peer-to-peer conversations, which these shirts are creating. And for Dan and I, we're like, fuck, like where do people go? Because like you don't want to ring Lifeline because you're not about to kill yourself. Like it's not a crisis situation.
Yeah.
And it's like you've really had the conversation as far with your partner or your workmate or your mate to a point where you're like, look, you're just sort of like sitting here with me. Like I need someone to like help me, like what do I do? And we just realized that the organizations that were like corporate level, like, tier one construction companies and mining companies, they had EAP services, right? Which is great. But one thing we noticed, like people aren't using them. And the second thing, we come from a residential carpentry background and I come from rural Australia, like no one's got mental health counselling services out there. So it's like, righto, how do we like remove all these barriers which currently exist, which is, going and seeing a GP, obviously taking time off work, getting on a mental health plan, which has its own like stigmas attached to it, like without using a better word, because your health insurance and stuff are impacted, you know what I mean? So it's like mental health plan, like, do I want to go on that? Blah, 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 blah. So we were like, righto, let's just remove all this crap out of the way. Let's just get a phone number, hire a counsellor or a psychologist and get people to call them. So that was kind of, our way of just being like, fuck it to a degree. Let's just do something different. And that's what we did. And then TAX was launched. We took our first call on my birthday in 2020. 8th of June.
Oh, wow. The timing of that.
I know.
Yeah.
So it was like middle of COVID, and that's what Dan has often laughed about. Like we already didn't have enough going on. We thought we'd launch our non-for-profit in the middle of COVID, which was like, outrageous. But I mean, from where we started it to where we're at now, that must be close to 19,000 tradies, truckies, rural and blue collar workers that have reached out to TAX. And it's really important for us for it not to be another crisis or another support line. Like it's a counselling service. You speak to the same counsellor through your journey. Like on average, people are having, 4 sessions with our counsellors and
it's free for the caller,
free,
right?
Yeah, it's free and ongoing. So like a big point of difference for us is that like it's quality of care over volume. So it's like we want to ensure that our counsellors aren't burning out. So like the system that's been designed is that, 45 minutes of care delivery, 15 minutes of note taking, 15 minutes of prep, then you roll into the next one. It's sort of like, we're not a call center, we're a counselling service, but it's telehealth, so text and call. And then, we're talking about how many people are actually just using text. So it's removing that barrier of actually having to pick the phone up and talk through it. So we're just being that first port of call for people to understand, how counselling works, but also people that know they need help and they can easily gain access to it. And it's just been, incredible where it's gotten to and where it's heading. And people, again, just can't believe that it's a service that's being provided for free without government funding. So it's pretty cool.
It's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. And so my understanding is that you have some corporate partners who are also, they'll contribute financially, and then you give them back the data of the calls and the information. Is that right?
Yeah. So it was an idea Dan conceptualized, must have been end of 2020 or early 21. It was basically, we realised that as an organisation, TradeMutt would not be able to fund enough money to TAX for it to scale. So it's like, we can keep providing funding, but it's only going to pay for like one or two counsellors, and then, we need some donations. And like, we were never in the mindset of another charity with rattling tins, downselling meat trays, and we were like, that is not us. We are a...
speak for yourself, mate.
I'll sell a meat tray.
I'll sell a meat tray with the best of them.
But who does, we want to have a business model that has got a revenue model that is not a flash in the pan, not these big events that we need to put on and we get funding, once or twice a year. Like, we need consistent cash flow to ensure that, we can have a set amount of counsellors on hand plus percentage of overheads for, managers, marketing, all the other stuff. But we just, we can't have these big ebbs and flows of cash. So Dan was like, well, why don't we do what we're doing, which is like donating money every month, and we can just go to corporates and say, hey, look, rather than giving us 120 grand in a lump sum, why don't you sign up for 12 months, give us 10 grand a month, and we'll provide you data and impact stories in regards to the change that you're making in the community. And I remember that Dan had conceptualized this idea. We'd started talking about it. We'd start building out a deck. And then I had this wedding in Longreach, and I'm on this bus heading out to this wedding. Me and my wife are sitting next to each other. And there was a lady across the way, Katie, who I knew from boarding school. And she just asked me how things are going, blah, 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 blah. And then I told her about, this is the next thing we're doing. And she was like, oh, that's awesome. And she worked for this really big ag investment fund in Brisbane. I remember the week after the wedding, she rang me up. She's like, oi, I've just spoken to our directors. Like, they're really keen to put money into this thing you're doing. And I was like, fuck. I was like, well, we haven't even
finished yet.
We're not even ready yet. Like, it's just an idea. But that was another one of those situations where it was like a door opened. We had people who were ready to go. So it was just up for us to just get it ready, make it happen. And then the funding came in. And then from there, it was just like this snowball effect of organizations being like, yeah, we want to jump on. So now we've got, I'm going to butcher the number, but it must be 55-ish plus corporate alliance partners that are funding from either 120 grand a year down to 30 grand a year with monthly payments to fulfill that, total financial obligation on an annual basis. And it's allowed us, one, to take the pressure off TradeMutt, to be the sole breadwinner for TAX, but also have a consistent revenue model to ensure that we can hire, I think it's about 17 people we've got over at TAX now. So it's really cool.
Oh, that's amazing. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. I love just that concept. It really resonates with me about it's not quite finished yet, but if you've got interest or the door's open or even there's a smidge of the door open, like, you just got to run through it, because if you wait for everything to be perfect and set up, like, it'll just never happen. That's the way I see it. I think you just got to give stuff a go exactly as you have.
Yeah. And like, it wasn't perfect. And it's probably still not, like, it's never going to be perfect, but it's not like, it's ever evolving, right? It's just, I think that's, like, we were laughing last night about our high-vis shirts. Like, the first high-vis shirts we brought out, we're like, fuck, what were those things?
But isn't it always the way?
Yeah, but it's like, you just got to keep going.
Sorry, go on. Were you going to say something there, Dan?
No.
Oh, no, all good. Andy, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I just enjoyed the story. Like I kind of have a couple of thoughts running through my head, and the odd question, but none of it is worth delivery because it's just highly entertaining and for me, I love the energy I think that the brand brings out and the energy that you guys bring out. So I count this as the first of many meetings that I'll have today, but it's no doubt my favourite one. So thank you.
Cheers.
The energy is that like it's hard because like it's funny, like people will see our marketing or they'll see ads or this and that. I'll be like, oh, TradeMutt, killing it, see your ads and this, things must be awesome. Rah, rah. And like we've grown, like we've launched and established, evolved and grown and all that kind of stuff. But like when people say that, I'm just like, that's the marketing working, right? Like that's the marketing. It's supposed to all look good. Like that's what's all supposed to look good. Then what you don't see is like, the hard part, like the all the challenges of running and growing these businesses. Like, I think about like I don't reflect on the module of certificate 3 carpentry joinery where we learned how to build a mental health counselling service. That just wasn't part of that course. So it's tough. And like being in the business, I talk about sometimes being in the business of mental health, which we are. We're in the business of mental health where we're thinking like problem solvers to create businesses that are sustainable, to fill a hole, to fill a gap in the market. But just because we're in the business of mental health, like it doesn't mean that we don't struggle with our own shit all the way through the whole thing. And this is like a massive part of it because when you put yourself out there to do, this kind of stuff, and Andy, you talk about the energy that we bring, like, yeah, me and Ed have brought a lot of energy to a lot of places and to like a lot of events. We do a lot of public speaking, and you do like all the podcasts and that kind of stuff. But there's so many hard down challenging parts of it all, and you're not immune to going through the exact same challenges and stresses and everything that every other business owner goes through. It's almost like it's just a hyper focus for us because of the industry that we're in, because of the cause that we advocate for. Like you're actually surrounded by it. Like sometimes you've got to really protect yourself from like stories and interactions with people because like it can be a lot. Like it can be a lot of times, and you need to sort of protect yourself in a way from some of the stories that you hear. And you create that space for people to talk, but you've also got to try to not take things on too much either. So there's been a whole journey of like learning about mental health for ourselves and in our own worlds, and the relationship between our mental health and the business of mental health that we're in. So it's this like weird, complex little web and world where we're on our own real-time mental health journey and also building businesses that are supporting the mental health of other people. So it's a total trip.
I'm so pleased that you have shared that because I think that's maybe one of the overlooked or underlooked thing, and especially if marketing does what it's meant to do and creates a shiny, pretty picture and kind of drives people to a certain product or event to then spend their hard-earned cash, and that's ultimately part of it. But then there's the under the hood, then there's the looking after yourself and the trial and error and working out exactly sort of where that sits. And I wonder if embracing the vulnerability, if you will, whether there's a story that you both could share about kind of where that is for you now. Like what are the things that you do now to kind of check in with your own mental health? Are there practices that you can share that other people might, that aren't trademarked, that other people could maybe benefit from, or other things that you've tried that just you try and then they suck and then you kind of try something else? I think there could be some gold there, mainly just for my benefit, not for anyone else.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have at various times throughout our journey not done a good enough job of looking after myself, but knowing that I needed to, but not feeling ready or even bothered or motivated to want to look after myself better, knowing everything you know, but still not necessarily always doing it. And I mean, we were talking about the TED talk, and I know that I said to you off air before we started how that TED talk was like a hectic part of my life, and like I at the time I knew how hectic it was for me, but only in reflection now do I sort of look back and I think about that and where I was at, because like that process of doing the TED talk, right, it was months and months of preparation and weekends, and with the TED crew and writing this thing and memorizing word for word this 16-minute performance, talking about some stuff that I haven't really publicly spoken all about before. And 3 weeks before I took to the TEDx stage, I'd ended a 5-year relationship, and it was like essentially crying myself to sleep every night, and then getting up and doing this performance of the TED talk in my living room and getting to certain points of it and just completely breaking down. I was just going to get COVID. That was my plan. The night before the TED talk, I was just going to get COVID, and I'm like, fuck it. Sorry, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. And like everyone around me kind of knew where I was at as well. Ed certainly knew where I was at because he had to, witness it and put up with it, I guess. But I was a shell of a man on that stage. And when people tell me, like, when they look at the TED talk, like, oh, it's great. Like, you don't see what's going on behind that. And when I look back at it, I'm like, shit, man. Like, I talk about game face a lot with Ed, and like how important it is as leaders to put your game face on and just get it done. And I look at that TED talk and I'm like, that is 100% like, that was imposter syndrome up there doing that, and like a combination of feeling like a complete imposter and a complete fraud for being up there spreading a message to the world about looking after your own mental health when I was in a hole. And so, yeah, when you talk about tips and tricks to look after yourself, I kind of think on some of the times that I haven't necessarily done that or been motivated to want to do that. And I think that's part of the mental health journey as well. Like sometimes you don't just want to flick a switch. Sometimes you just want or need to sit in the discomfort of feeling like shit, to let that fuel you or motivate you to just like experience those range of emotions, to understand how your body ticks and how your mind works. But on the flip side of that, for me, like things that I do to look after my mental health are like, I like to joke about when I play indoor cricket every Tuesday night with my team. Love that team, love the boys. We go and catch up. I use it like I'm about to be 35, like playing social cricket. I'm competitive, and I use that Tuesday night to get my fucking demons out of me. Like,
that's awesome.
And like the guys on my team know that. Like, I just banter, we talk shit. Like, and I'm probably going to overdrive on that because, like, you do these big weeks, and then you need that real outlet. So that's one of my outlets that I use. I've got a few others, but yeah, Ed can talk to you a lot about looking after himself. He does a better job of it than me.
I suppose, like, for me, it's like I can, obviously, like, relate with what Dan said, because there's been periods through the journey where, like, you're just working so hard and you're just trying to keep everything going and stuff, and then, like, you and your well-being, like, literally takes a back seat because it just hasn't been prioritized. And like when you're younger, you probably feel like you're kind of invincible. You can pretty much just push it as hard as you want. It'll all be fine. But I mean, like burnout and everything like that is obviously something that's quite real. And I kind of get frustrated when you hear these people on podcasts and stuff talking that like burnout's bullshit, because I'm like, well, fuck. I mean, it definitely is a real thing for me.
I would agree.
So, like, there's just like small things like trying to take a week off, like, every quarter is kind of a thing that I try and do. Like book in trips with mates because before you know it, the year's just full and you get to, Black Friday, and then you're like, oh, yep, bit of Christmas, and then like you're back into it. So like I learned that lesson. So I'm like, right, I've got to book in some like annual trips. So like we go to Fraser Island every year, me and my brother-in-law and stuff, my wife, which is really good. And then just other things between that. Got a really good group of mates at our like 5 a.m. session. So like we'll go for a coffee on a Sunday Sunday morning after gym, and working for a triathlon at the moment. So like I've got mates from the gym that are all doing like triathlons later in the year. So, we're going for a big cycle on Sunday, and I saw Sam this morning because like went to the 7 o'clock gym because we came home late last night, and just all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Like even if something changes, like I got home later than I normally do last night, it's like not an excuse for me or my wife to be like, righto, we'll just sleep in and just get on with our day. It's like, no, we'll still go and do our thing and like make sure that's all happening. And then outside of that's obviously finding a really good psychologist really has been a big thing for me, because like my wife and I together and like individually have been and seen different people over the years and didn't really ever gel with anyone until this guy here in Toowoomba, and he's just been like awesome for me because I'm very much a person of like, right, tell me what I need to do. Like I don't want to sit here and talk. Like I need something to be like, I need to do something. Like tell me what needs to happen, and he's very much like that. So he's like, he's a psychologist. He's probably more like a coach, to be honest, because he like really holds you to account. And like even in the last conversation we had, like something was coming up again, and he was like looking back on notes from like 2 years ago, and he's like, oh fuck, there's that thing again. It's just popped up. He's like, I thought we'd talked about that, and so that's really good, that those sorts of things have been really important just for me and my well-being, and being able to just like continue to rock up every day really.
I have a question for you, Edward, because I don't know this. These cycles you're going on.
Oh yeah, I'm not in the lycra yet, but yes.
Fuck, I swear, mate.
I'm going to be a lycra boy. I am going to be a
TradeMutt lycra.
Yeah, well, there's TradeMutt. I've got a TradeMutt.
Hang on. You are going to be a lycra boy?
I will be. Yeah.
I've actually got another call. I got to go. I can't tolerate that. I swear, if you rock up to the office,
I'll clip in with my cleats on.
Clopping in your fucking cleats, mate. Honestly, that's it.
We both used to work with and as clients and directly with 99 Bikes, so we can hook you up with some good gear.
Can we just not make that recommendation? Ed walked into the office with his bloody Matt Shervington bloody lunchbox.
Lunchbox. Okay. Oh, meatless snack.
I think he wishes, right, Ed?
Yeah, sure. But no, like it's just those small things, and it's like an evolution as well. Like there'll be the next thing. It's like like there's this fitness thing that's on at in Brisbane in August that like heaps of us from the gym are going to go down to and compete. So it's like all that sort of fun stuff. Like it's just the next thing. Like you need that stuff outside of work. You just can't be married to it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was to ask you guys, I guess you speak and hear a lot of stories, and Dan, it really kind of resonated with me. I think about hearing Grace Tame talk after she was Australian of the Year, and she said about people didn't ever really give her enough thought around having to re-traumatize every time she would share some of those stories. Like it's re-traumatizing in a way, and then hearing other people's stories. And as you've said, I imagine you guys get so many, and I'm going to say success stories or positive stories where you've had impacts, but also like that would be hard to a big burden to carry at times. And then, as you said, your own individual mental health, and as a business owner as well, I hear it. Like I'm resonating with everything you're saying and have the same ups and downs too in different ways. What's one thing for you guys, if you were to speak to leaders or a message to leaders, to business owners around like what's one thing they could do to be supporting their people in their own mental health journeys?
Talk about your own is probably the thing that we've learned along the way. Like talk about your stuff, and it's kind of, it obviously is direct in line with the end of Dan's TED talk. It's kind of like, the thing that sticks to mind is when Paul Green took his life a couple of years ago, and they had everyone on the Friday night footy and had the panel, and they were all talking about mental health. Like we've really got to start talking about it, and it's like really, it's suicide, it's so bad. And I came back just fucking red. I was so angry. And like Dan and I were talking, and it was like, no one actually said anything. Like, people are talking about mental health. Like, no one's actually talking about mental health. Like, people are talking about needing to talk about it. It's like, fuck, can someone just say something? And so
Yes.
for us, like, we've always been, like, radically transparent is probably the term for like how we've been going for the team, and talking like on these podcasts, you know what I mean? Like that story, like with a mate the other day, like, I was like, you gonna come for a swim this Saturday at the pool? He's like, oh, I can't, I've got a psych appointment at 1:00. I'm like, fuck yes. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's those sorts of things. Like, we start talking about normalizing it, just make it so much easier for people. And like, we've noticed that just within our team, but also like our mateship groups, like people are like, oh yeah, I've got a psych appointment or whatever. It's like, fuck, that's awesome. You know what I mean? So I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I would add on to that from a business perspective. I agree with Ed on all of that. And then also, I think one of the insights, or one of the sort of learnings that I had, that I picked up as a business owner, we sort of both did, was this idea for your people, for your staff, is to really invest in setting them up to succeed in their job. Whatever that looks like in any particular business or workplace. Like, there's sort of no point hiring people or bringing people into the fold or into the mix if you're not going to be committed to set them up and put the tools and resources around them for them to really succeed in their role, and support them, like make them feel supported and like you've got their back. Like, people come to work, we spend so much time at work, and like work's a real sensitive like topic for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people find themselves, in workplaces that are fucking awful, or that, toxic cultures, or, this kind of stuff. And it's almost like, like they're stuck in that relationship because they need the income, because everyone's so financially squeezed and stressed at the moment, and all that kind of stuff. So like, I really kind of like to make sure that our staff know that we give a fuck about them, because we do, and like we need them, and I make sure like, that they know that I know that they know, we all know we need them. So, and sure, staff are replaceable, but you also don't want to have a turnstile of staff, like, and that's the other thing is like, as Ed was talking about last night, some of the stories he was talking about, we haven't had to sack many people. We really haven't. That's why like the two that come to mind are really like sort of traumatic but hilarious for us because of like the circumstances in which that happened. We don't want to have to sack people. That's not the go, you know what I mean? And like, you can really avoid that by supporting people to succeed, in the workplace. But we've been so naive at different times, and the way we've sort of done things. You don't want to turnstile a staff. You just want to be able to set them up, trust them, build a trusting relationship, and foster them so everyone can succeed. So yeah, and I say that in the same time as having to set yourself up for success, which is I also rarely do, or is easy to forget.
Yes. So often it's, if we're then focusing on everyone else, the customers, the team, and remembering to put some energy back in for ourselves.
Yeah.
Awesome. Are there any other last thoughts here for you guys, for leaders, what you want to see in the workplace, any tips around mental health?
The one look, it is worth reiterating the one that Ed said, honestly, about leaders finding ways to show vulnerability themselves, and to bring the walls down, because that's where it starts. Like, that's where it starts at the top. If you're one, like, the same thing like Ed's talking about with the boys on the rugby league panel, talking about needing to talk about mental health without actually talking about something of substance. Like, that is the biggest problem right now, and that's the biggest hurdle to overcome. And that was the crux of the TED Talk as well. It's like, stop talking about needing to talk about it. Stop tiptoeing and pussyfooting around the subject out of fear that you're going to make something worse. Like, things aren't great now, so like, we might as well start talking about it, because I reckon that's going to help other people talk about it too. So like, that's the biggest thing, and that's what we try to be, is open and honest and sort of vulnerable on a platform like this as well, to talk about the real stuff and the challenges and, not pretending like that everything's sweet all the time, because it's not.
Yeah, for sure.
Dan and Ed, can I ask, so if we use that Paul Green example and then the panelists, sitting there talking about if you're, a bit sad, you just got to talk to someone. In terms of a practical execution, how would you have liked to seen that conversation go?
Oh, probably, all of the people on that panel have been in similar situations as to Paul would have found himself, like stresses with, work and, being a professional athlete and stuff, and just talking about thinking back times like, I've really struggled through periods and, this is an example of that. And this is what I went and did about it. You know what I mean? So it's like very normal for us to like go and get support or talk to people about it. You know what I mean? One that sticks to mind with us is like, we had Dave Shillington on the podcast. He played for the Roosters and Maroons in Canberra, and he came on our podcast many years ago. And he was very vulnerable with us, talking about like his experience when he was at the Roosters, and he was a young bloke. He was sort of coming off the bench, didn't have really like a consistent spot in the first grade team, and was feeling a bit down and was probably partying a bit hard and like taking his frustrations out through that sort of rebellious type streak, I would say. And then Freddie Fittler was his coach at the time, and Freddie saw him coming off the paddock there one day and was just like, mate, what's going on? And he was like, no, it's like I'm all sweet, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, I can see there's obviously something going on. Like if there is something you want to chat to me about, like feel free. There's no worries. And, or if you want to go chat to a professional, I can give you the number of the psychologist I go and see. And like Shillo reckons like in that moment, like
those words, who I go and see.
Down, and he was just like, fuck, you're Brad Fittler. Like you're like one of the greatest ever. Like, what do you mean you go and see a psychologist? Like, is that a thing? Like, you know what I mean? Like he didn't say that, but he's thinking that in his head. Yeah. And then he said that he went and had like 3 or 4 sessions with this dude in Bondi. And he said like the change that made for him, both personally and professionally, it was just like the biggest change ever in his life. It was like overwhelmingly positive. And then like, he's like playing for the Maroons the next year, signed this big contract with Canberra, and like, those sorts of things are like, fuck yeah, that's a real story. You know what I mean? And you just don't hear enough of those. You just do not hear enough of those. And I don't know why. As a society that we're still, like even from a media standpoint, it's not a thing. And it's probably elements of, not to go into like really deep, but it's like, politics, like you watch politicians, like, fuck, they've never said a real thing ever. And they're just yelling and abusing each other like, 8-year-olds at a smoke shop. And then you've got the same thing when you watch like, panel television. Like there's literally one person on the panel that's there to take the piss out of someone or something, make a mockery of them. It's like literally someone to bully people. It's like, fuck, what is this? Is this society? Is it? It's like, this is fucking awful. So when you see shit like that, it kind of, you're like, fuck, what chance do we have? Like we've got a lot of work to do. You know what I mean? It's a strange one, really strange one.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that clarity. So I think it just is that missing piece is like, where do you inject I into the sentence? And then the moment you do that, then you can kind of maybe open a door and maybe they're willing to share right then and there, or maybe they're not, maybe they're going to sit on it. But either way, that they know that you're going to be available as opposed to some basic kind of canned response, to be able to say something just super generic that they read off a cornflakes box or something like that.
I'm sitting here on the edge of my seat because I feel now I'm like, I haven't contributed how it's been part of my life and shared what the psychologists I've seen for us as a counsellor, like together, for me independently, which I have done over the years. And then in my mind, I'm like, why aren't I sharing that? Like I'm part of the problem then if you're not sharing it, right? And my thought is, you don't want to in this moment, I don't want to turn that focus away from you guys. But also sitting here, I'm like, no, do you know what? Absolutely. Like it's probably important for me to say on this recording with our community, me too, like 100%. When I went through a divorce many years ago. My ex-husband suffered pretty badly from depression, and I was really young when we got together. I was 21, and I had never been exposed knowingly to mental health conditions. I think I'd been exposed to them, but just not knowingly. And that was really hard as a young, really positive, optimistic person who just thought you just say, well, just switch it off, like just get a better attitude. Come on, isn't it that simple? And obviously, as I've grown up, realizing, no, it's not that simple. And Andy and I, our daughter, we had a miscarriage before our daughter. And then when our daughter was born, she was born 15 weeks premature. So she had a 50% chance of survival and spent three months in hospital. And that time for us was really, really difficult. And particularly when she came home from hospital, for me, Andy was back at work and I was very isolated, and the pressure that took on our relationship. It's kind of, we sit here now and go, oh, we wouldn't want to live 2017 again, because that it's a miracle we're kind of where we are now. But I don't believe we would have been here now if we hadn't have gone to that psychologist together. So firstly, through my divorce, and then the two of us independently and as a couple. And more recently, I mean, I see a coach. I haven't got a psychologist at the moment, but I have two coaches that I go to regularly for kind of counselling and emotional support. But more recently, Andy, you've made some big life changes with careers and different things, and through men's group you've been with, and also a psychologist you're seeing. So not throwing your story in, but just openly sharing, like it's been a big part of our lives too. And I do believe the more we talk about it, the more it's just, oh yeah, don't you catch up with your mate? Don't you speak to people about your emotions and your energy and what you need for your mental well-being? We all should.
100%.
Totally. Yeah, there's two things on that really quickly. I remember back in 2017, we went to 3 different psychologists. I went to one individually, and then I felt like
she pretty much told you to leave me.
Yeah, I was getting led down a garden path.
I was not an advocate.
I just remember sitting there thinking, oh, this just doesn't feel right. I know things aren't great, but this doesn't feel like the right way for me to go in the life. So I stopped going there. Then we went and saw this other super old guy, and he just he gave us a real gift of advice, but then it just probably wasn't going to be ongoing. It was more like a one-night stand with that guy. And then eventually we found someone who was just incredible, you know. So it may not, I think the anecdote there is that it may not, I think you mentioned this before, Ed, like it doesn't, you know, quite often it's not going to be like the first person that you meet. Sometimes you're going to have to go through a couple and be open to that and find the one that speaks your language, find the one that resonates for you, find the one that coaches you if you want to be coached, or find the one that just tells you straight, tells you how it is, holds space, acts as a mirror. And then if you find that, then happy days. And
that person is out there, I reckon, for us all. It's just finding it. It's kind of like a partner in life. Like you got to find the right person. But
that's it. And the other anecdote, I just met a guy recently on our trip. Actually, he's a POM, and we won't hold that against him. But
bastard.
Yeah, but I might a little bit because he does whinge. And I remember I was talking about certain things over the last 9 months ago. Shez mentioned, you know, I've had a bit of a career change and. You know, probably just realign some things in my life, because there were a couple of parts of my life I sort of went through a stage last year where I felt like the tools that I had weren't particularly sharp anymore. So over time, you kind of build this set of tools, you know, with kind of like, I play golf, or I go for runs, or I meditate every day, or whatever they are. They're just some of mine. So kind of went through there, felt like the tools weren't particularly sharp, like they just needed sort of, you know, some looking at, I guess. And then kind of went on that journey. Anyway, I was talking to this English guy about it, and he asked me, he's like, wow, did you like go through that whole thing and come to that conclusion by yourself? And I said, no, I fucking didn't. Like I spoke to plenty of people about it. I spoke to, you know, we talked about it with my wife. I talked about it with a couple of friends that I trust to have those conversations about. I went to a psychologist. I spoke to them. I went to my coach, and I was part of 2 different men's groups. So there's lots of sounding boards in there to provide, you know, live feedback on. The idea that you would do it by yourself, I think, is just a total myth. A total myth. I just don't for a minute believe that it's actually possible to get to that point by yourself, and it doesn't make you less of a man or less of a human thinking that you can, because there's plenty of things out there. So
totally.
this morning when I was saying goodbye to our daughter and I told her what we were doing this morning, and I said to her, just when you put words simply to a kid, and I was saying, I'm talking to two guys who are doing some pretty special things around mental health and our mindsets. And I'm like, do you know how important it is to speak about your emotions and not keep it all inside? Because when we keep it inside, it doesn't feel good, does it? She's like, no. And even just talking to a 7-year-old around, how does it feel when you talk things out? And who can you talk to? And that was a real proud moment for me, because I thought, you know what, they're the conversations I think for us in our generations and the future generation, just to normalize just talking, because our parents, and probably us, I'm a bit older than you guys, but in and around our generations and our parents, that definitely wasn't on the agenda as we were growing up in school or your Cert 3 in carpentry. But that's the conversation starter now. And, I think I just really want to thank you guys for the contribution. And I know, I'm sure there's the highs and the lows, as you've said, but I've no doubt, and now being able to share this with our community now, the people in our world as well. And I just really want to thank you for the incredible work you're doing, and don't stop. Look after yourselves, but don't stop, because I think you're really just doing really special, important things.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate
it. Means a lot. Yeah, it's been a great chat. It's been great to spin a few yarns and share some stories with you both and your listeners.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys. We'll leave all the links so everyone can find where you are, go and buy some funky shirts and support it all. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us on the Lead with Courage podcast. We illuminate leadership, and it's our mission to inspire and grow the leaders of today to create a better tomorrow. We hope and trust that this episode has given you some insights and joy to empower you to live your biggest, best life. If you did enjoy the episode, we'd be so grateful for you to rate and share wherever you listen to this podcast. And until next time, go and lead with courage. Illuminate Leadership is not a licensed mental health service or a substitute for professional mental health advice, treatment, or assessment. Any conversation in this podcast is general in nature, and if you're struggling, please see a healthcare professional or call Lifeline on 131114.